Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. I am just a few hours back from the Monarca down in Mexico. A couple little things to say about that before I get to my guest, Karlis Jaunpetrovics, which sorry, buddy, I know I butchered your last name, but formerly your test pilot for BGD, now an SIV instructor. He mentored underneath the Fly.io program with Malin Lobb and Fabian Blanco, who I've had both those guys on the show, Malin a couple times. Karlis' story is amazing, and we get into all kinds of subjects here. I'll get into that here in a bit, but what's on my mind today is something that is should be on it frequently, I think, for everybody. The Monarca was, as always, just incredible, awesome flying. We had 6 amazing days. I, of course, won it last year, and this year I literally could not do anything right. I crashed off launch the very first day, pretty benign, but slammed something in my leg pretty good, and took the wind out of me, and had a bit of a sprained rib, I think, and then bombed out that day. I relaunched and my zipper was all screwed up. But anyway, just one gong show after another. I think I finished somewhere, I never actually even looked, but somewhere in the 70s or 80s. At one point, I think I was last in the competition. So, as my buddy Farmer likes to say, strikes and gutters. And strangely, I think the longer I've been doing this, when I do poorly, it doesn't seem to bother me very much, because and not just because of this, but sadly there was a death on the last day of the competition. I don't know really any of the details. Norwegian pilot, and obviously very tragic and very sad for his family and friends and our community. And unfortunately, this is not that rare, although it certainly is rare enough that we all keep doing it. But at the end, at the awards, a friend of mine, who's I've also had on the show, was pretty shook up by it, and just asked that question that I think we need to ask ourselves very frequently, which is it worth it? Is the risk worth it? And most of the time, I think the answer to that is yes. I don't think any of us are blind to the fact that what happened to the Norwegian pilot could happen to us. It's just part of the game. And most of the time, I think, maybe for some people it's all the time, that risk is worth it. But I think it's worth asking, checking in with that every once in a while. And maybe sometimes it's not. Maybe sometimes you're not feeling it, or you've got other obligations or family or whatever that, it's never hardest on the person that goes in. It's hardest on all the people who are around that person and love that person. And anyway, I think it's something that Belcourt and I talked about it a bit there that last night during the awards, or after the awards ceremony, and he was reminding me of that we definitely need to ask ourselves that question pretty frequently. So to come full circle on that thought, the reason I don't seem to get upset about poor finishes or poor results is that I think we should celebrate every safe flight for what it is. It's amazing, and you get to touch down safely and walk away. And that seems to be helping my head when things don't go very well in competition. I can just land and laugh about it and go, hey, I just had a great flight and I'm down safe, and bummer about the results. Who cares? It's better than potentially the alternative. That leads me to Karlis. Karlis got started pretty early. He's been flying since 2012. He started his flying journey in Taiwan when he was traveling around the world. Got instantly addicted. Flew there quite a bit. He's got some great stories in here about Taiwan. And then he got really into acro. Started doing acro up in Nepal, and became a really competent acro pilot. And that led him to the doorsteps of Bruce Goldsmith and Bruce and Anna and BGD. became a test pilot for them for a few years, and then decided it was a little bit too much inside work. Even though he was a test pilot, you're of course flying outside all the time. But he talks about the risks there and what's involved and what he learned being a test pilot, and then decided he wanted to get a lot more into XC and into instructing. Like me, he's running comps down in Le Chab in Laragne, which is over by Gap in southern France, one of the places I cut my teeth on a couple of my first trips over to France. And he has a lot to say about how to run safe comps and the importance of communications, radios, just putting everything in place there to make them work when you can kind of step in and decide somebody's taking too much risk and ground them, both just as an instructor, but also in a comp. The importance of finding mentors, how to find mentors if you're an introvert, and a ton. We bounce around in a lot of different really cool places that he has been exploring and teaching. He's an APPI instructor. He's got a fantastic website and kind of pre-SIV video and a course that you go through, again, under the, what he learned from FlyO, the tactics there and strategies for their SIV courses are very similar. But check out his website. I'll have all these in the show notes, but it's Flying Karlis, that's with a K, .com. Lots of great resources there, and I'll have a bunch, like I said, in the show notes as well. Really enjoyed this conversation. He's incredibly articulate about all things flying and is making a big impact on the sport in Europe and around the world, and providing an incredible platform for learning. And he's very good clearly at teaching. So I was pretty inspired by all of this. We had a great time. We really enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. Cheers. Karlis, thanks for coming on the Mayhem. I was excited to get an email from our mutual friend Jock. I understand he's maybe worked with you on the comps you're running out there in southern France, and he gave me some questions to ask you, and then that took me on a deep dive into some of your background as a test pilot for BGD and your courses and your SIV. So yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. I thought the place we'd start is, I'd like to try to say your last name, Jaunpetrovics. Is that right?
Almost, yeah. It's
not really.
It's Jaunpetrovic.
Jaunpetrovic.
Yeah, in Latvian the J.
You're from Latvia.
Yeah. So in Latvia the J is pronounced as Y instead of J.
Okay. Gotcha. And you're in a nice part of the world. You're down near Laragne.
Yeah, so I've been in south of France since 2016, and I've moved here near Laragne-Montéglin, which I'm in a small town, Serres, in 2018, and I've been here as a home base since then.
I understand you kind of took off from Latvia in the 2009 or around then. How did you land? You weren't a pilot then, that came later, but how did you were traveling the world. How did you land in that part of France after seeing so many different places?
Yeah, it was really, I came here first for the job interview with BGD. They flew me out to south of France, Gorlier, or it's just near Gordon takeoff, where the competitions sometimes happen. And it was a 2-week-long job interview. It's the longest job interview I've ever had.
Really?
Yeah, it's
wow.
2 weeks.
And Grelier, that's Ozone's base too, right? Don't the two of them operate in the same spot? Yeah,
it's the same. Grelier is actually where the XC Mag used to be based out. I mixed up the towns. They are in Magagnosc, which is more on near the main road towards Nice, just next to Grasse, really. Grasse is the easiest town to... Yeah, it's the same place where Ozone is. Bruce actually created Ozone back in the day. He was one of the co-founders, so it's the same location. And They flew me out. The plan was to see if I would be a good fit for the team and to make a commercial for the Epic, that BGD Epic that is now quite well known in especially in Acro community. Yeah, that's how I ended up in France to be a test pilot for BGD.
So what do they do for 2 weeks? I'd love to find out what does the interview look like to become a test pilot?
Well,
just fly all the time, or
yeah. So back then, BGD was a small company, so everybody did multiple jobs. Literally in office, it was Bruce Arne and Anthony Green, and I joined that team. There was only 3 people in the French office, and a few more in Austria. So the original plan was that I would do sales manager for them, for the international market, for the Eastern Europe and Asia mostly, and do test piloting. So sales in the morning and test pilot in the afternoon. So yeah, really, I mean, the sales part, they wanted to see if I'm able to do that. And for test piloting part, it's flying together and seeing if fit. And then if I would be a fit for the team, as it was very small company at the time, and then the flying style, if it matches as well, because that's it's because all the rest of the actual skills of how to be a test pilot, there is no schools for that, so the company has to teach you anyway. Anybody who comes from free flying community and wants to be a test pilot, you will, even if you go through the certification center, like Air Turquoise does a course, that course is 4 to 5 days or so, and you're not going to become a test pilot. You'll be more informed, but then it takes a lot of time to learn.
Just to understand what the testing is.
Yeah, the actual flying bit of testing is, it's an art in itself. It's like the Acro reversed. You collapse things and you do nothing. You follow it. And that's a really difficult thing to learn, because we, throughout our career, throughout our flights, all we do is to control actively the wing and keep it open. And you have to suppress that and only act when needed. If, the wing is the prototype, not the wing, the prototype, if it's not good enough to reopen by itself, then you have to act. I was all Acro at the time, and just came from summer in Organia, and it was really, really difficult not to do something. So that was really the most difficult part for me to learn, was just let it go and go with it, and don't weight shift. Or it's really for me, it was really difficult to do proper tests, because the tests are defined. You have exactly what you need to do, and it's all filmed, so it's very easy to check if you done it right or wrong. But it's really hard to execute the same test over and over again, exactly as prescribed by the certification.
And does that stay, you'll have to forgive me because I don't know a ton about the Air Turquoise and certification process, but does that stay static through the different ranges of gliders? I mean, are you still expected to do nothing when you're on a CCC glider as well?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the test,
Really?
the difference between A, B, C, D class is the time angle of reopening, sort of. In a nutshell, it's a bit more complicated than that, but so for ENA, asymmetric collapse is supposed to open at certain turn radius, and not radius, but degrees, and a certain pitch forward, or so on and so forth. And for the higher certification classes, it's longer time and more, they can turn more, they can dive more. And they are still supposed to reopen by themselves for most things. And then some maneuvers is if you had to have pilot action, then it by default goes to a certain class.
Being a test pilot, does it introduce quite a bit more personal risk to your life?
No, I think, in recent memory, and to my knowledge, there hasn't been no lethal accidents for test pilots or serious injuries. There's been some injuries. Alan Zeller had a serious injury testing some high CCC wings. But I mean, in Godon, between the BGD at the time, we were 3. was about 5 or 6. There was nothing in the 2-year span that I spent with them. Nothing for us and nothing for them, as far as I know. It's you know that you're gonna do them, so it's the same as in acro, altitude, box. You know, you don't just go crazy when you
margin.
You have your margins, you have your reserves, of course, and the wings, the prototypes themselves, we test them on the ground. Like ground handling is a good way to check your wing. If it's on the ground, you're already gonna see how the wing behaves in the air. There's a lot of indication.
Yeah.
And you never take a prototype and just take off. You do your due diligence before that, so make sure it flies in the first place, and then you do your flying bits. And no, I never felt that it would be dangerous, or that I've done, mostly because of stupidity, crazier things in acro. Pushing it too soon, too far. When I was a young pilot, I didn't have the same experience with testing.
Let's rewind that before your time with BGD. Your passion was acro, I gather. That was when you first. When did you first get into it? Where did you get into it? And bring us up to the BGD stuff.
Yeah, so my traveling around as a early 20s, I ended up in Taiwan. I was teaching English there, and moved in with a guy, Tim, a friend of mine still till this day, and he had a backpack. And so we start talking what that backpack is, and he told me, it's a small airplane. I'm like, yeah. I never heard of paragliding before that. So yeah.
Really?
I mean, I've seen people flying with engines but I thought it's parachuting with some motor or something like that. I had no clue what paragliding is.
Yeah.
And so he introduced me to his instructor that taught him back in Taiwan, and so I learned, and I was hooked, as we all tend to be after our first flights. And I used to teach the English 5 days a week, and I went down to 2 days a week, and the rest of the days I was flying as much as possible, or ground handling the first year. And before going to Taiwan, I visited Nepal and India. I spent a year there, and so I reached out to some people in Pokhara, Nepal, back in the day. This is around May 2012. It was the golden era of commercial tandem flying for Westerners in Pokhara back then. So I reached out to some companies and see if I can, drive the van or do whatever to progress in paragliding. And one company answered, and I ended up in Pokhara. Long story short, I did 3 seasons of commercial tandem flying in Pokhara while learning acrobatics. Because when you start paragliding, especially back then, when you Googled it, the fun stuff for late 20s, the most cool thing that you could see is acrobatics. Cross country looked boring. It was not interesting one bit.
Yeah.
You just sit in the saddle for hours. I didn't know any better back then, so acro it was. And the commercial tandems was just a way to pay for it all, so I can fly as much as I can. And in Pokhara, we did quite a bit of acro tandem as well, when the passengers were up for it. So we would do 5 flights on tandem and then do 2 flights on acro after that, and day in, day out. It was my first months of flying tandems was 25 days, 5 flights a day, every single day. That was my first commercial season.
Wow.
It's it was the Wild East back then. It was a beautiful learning place. There was a lot of people. Quite a few of them have gone to Alps now, the people who've been there in Pokhara, and we all were young and just learning and spending our winters there to extend the season.
Good scene.
And back in Taiwan, I started doing some teaching, beginner teaching, and I reached out to multiple companies for dealerships and things like that to sell some gear. And so I worked with BGD as their dealer in Taiwan for a couple of years. And eventually the company was growing and they needed more people, and they were looking for people, and they liked my communication with them through the emails, and that's how I got the interview to BGD. And of course, and they offered me sales job first, and I said no, thank you, I'm not interested. I would like to be a test pilot because I want to fly, and I worked in offices before, and it's not my cup of tea. So they met me halfway, like halfway, or what's the expression? And so I flew out, and rest is history. I stayed in France 2 years with them.
And at this point, were you flying much XC or mostly still just
not
Acro?
at all. My longest flight was, I think, 83 kilometers in Taiwan, cross country, and most of them were 50, maybe maximum, more or less. So it was like I did a bit of trying it out, and I started to like it quite a lot because it's quite a bit of a challenge, as you well know. It's not it's not an easy thing to do, and especially in the 2012, 13, 14, there wasn't as much information out there. Actually, to that point, I listened about 10 podcasts of yours, the first ones in a row, all of them, because it was the only place at the time to find information that the source was pre-checked. So that you did your work, found the people, right. And so sort of you were the guarantee that the person that I listened to actually knows what they're talking about. Because back then I was new to this all. I didn't know anybody in the sport, and the only options I really had was paragliding forum, and there it was really hard to figure out. You know, there was a lot of it's controversies, and you don't know who's talking. So the Cloud-Based Mayhem was one of the first sources, online sources, to my knowledge at the time.
Oh, that's cool to hear. Oh.
Yeah, it's surreal to be here after all these years to be part of it.
That's been quite a while. It's 10 years.
I've been flying for now 13, 14. So yeah, it was early in my flying career before I.
There you go.
And nowadays we're lucky. We have a lot more of it. YouTubes are getting better, and
there's a lot of outlets doing a lot of really good things, you know, for sure. I mean, even I used to say, you know, even from a magazine, it's hard to get long form answers. Yeah, I mean, they're articles, you know, so it's hard to get. You know, Bruce has been writing for XC Magazine for a long time, and they're so great, but it's hard to get. You know, you always want to go. I want to talk to Bruce. I want more. I want more. But now they're doing their master's class, and you know, the media sphere. When somebody told me I should do a podcast, I didn't even know what a podcast was. What was that? So the media sphere is really expanded, and there's lots of people like yourself with your YouTube channel. It's great that we have so many different ways to get information out there. What's the flying like in Taiwan? How big's the community? At
the time, there was about 200 active pilots on the island, local.
Wow.
Some tandem operations in schools. Very friendly community. To me personally, it's been nothing but amazing community of local pilots. The flying itself, it's an island. It's about 400 kilometers north to south and 200 east to west. The size of it, it's a teardrop shape. Middle of it is mountains up to 4,000 meters, which is quite surprising. They even get some snow.
Yeah, well, I had no idea it was that high.
Very rarely,
really?
But yeah.
Wow, because you're quite close to the equator.
It's not too far off, but it's you get the snow only at the mountains, of course, not at the sea level. And,
sure.
It's because it's subtropical. It's all thick forests and humid air, so cloud base is quite low usually, and it's hard to get any longer distance. But I've been following Taiwan ever since, of course, and people have done now 120, I think, straight line flights on the East Coast, which was not the case when I was there. I think national record was like 80 kilometers or 90. So now boys are pushing the limits a bit. I mean, there's not much because there's not much distance left that you can do straight.
Okay, so you can't fly the length
of because the south and north is windy. It's Venturi. The island creates a Venturi as the ocean winds comes around, and so that gets too much for us. So you're kind of limited to the more or less middle of it. You can, of course, fly north and south on specific days. And the mountain range is it's like a dinosaur's back. It goes down at both sides, all sides of the island, and the center is really high. So it's for big distances it's tricky, but for this time of the year, from about November to late February, it's really nice, smooth flying, quite reliable on westerly coast. It's an amazing culture. It's a place worth visiting. Flying there, it's not grand for big distances, but it's nice. And
you were saying it's quite forgiving, quite in some ways gentle.
Yeah, I've tested the trees.
Good for tree landing.
Early in my flying, I sank into one, and it's a long walkouts and rescue there. I mean, helis are hard to get by. It's mostly military, so rescue, it's self-rescue or hiking out. But yeah, it's very forgiving if you're going to end up in trees. The most dangerous thing is if you land in a beetle nut plantations. It's the chewing thing that they do. It's like a chewing...
the chewing thing.
Yeah, that destroys everything in your mouth and teeth and all that. But it's more valuable than gold there. And so they have bear traps and people come with guns and it's a serious... So if you land there, it's better not to move around because they have actual traps. And
that's it. I mean, I always associate beetle nut with cocaine producing countries. You know, that usually kind of goes hand in hand. Like bus drivers will always chew on the beetle nut with the coca leaves because it keeps them awake, you know, so they can go drive 18 hours straight, you know, in places like Bolivia and that kind of thing. Is it similar in Taiwan?
Not that I know of, because I mean, the beetle nut is fully legal and it's sold everywhere in the country. Yeah,
I think the beetle nut is not. No. I don't think that has any cocaine properties. It's more that they would wrap it. I might have this wrong. I know that it's used with the coca
They wrap
leaf
it with leaves in Taiwan as well, but not coca leaves. Some leaves. In Taiwan, drug trafficking is capital punishment, so that's a lot more strict there.
Sure.
But beetle nut, that's just for the nut itself, and apparently it's very addictive.
More valuable than gold.
So they're protective of those, but it's easy to see the skinny single trees and kind of it doesn't look like forest. So those are the ones you don't want to avoid.
Okay. Stay
but
away
other
from
than
those
that,
areas.
Taiwan is incredibly safe and incredibly
know.
friendly. It's an amazing place. I spent there 5 years. It's my home in Asia.
Right. Wow. Cool. I'll have to go try it out. I think you're the first person I've spoken to maybe others have flown in Taiwan and we didn't touch on the subject, but I don't know anything about the flying in Taiwan. That's cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to explore.
Cool. Okay, so then you go to BGD and you spend some time being a test pilot. Or why did that end? What did you decide? You decided to do something else?
For me, this is something that doesn't sound like it when you're a test pilot, but a lot of the work is in office, and the flying is. We still flew 3-4 days a week. Would go out and test, and it's the process of it is very repetitive, and I like challenges that add something like cross country. It's never the same, even though if you fly the same site, it's never going to be the same flight. This is also why I stopped acrobatics seriously, because it's the same repetition, and every day is the same. Where cross country, you never get to the same days, and that's what I really love about cross country, and why I switched into cross country flying. And more than competitions or anything else, as a pilot to fly, it's just to try to do as big of a distance as the day allows and connect different mountain ranges. That's what I love the most about paragliding, and being a test pilot doesn't offer that. And this is why I decided to part ways and go do my own thing. We still cooperate, and we're gonna run the BGD waitlist together, and all. Of course. The single biggest mentor I've had is Bruce Goldsmith, and about 80% I know about this. Yeah, but
what a mentor!
I couldn't believe my luck on that one.
Not bad. Yeah, that's that's the gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, it was surreal to land in Nice airport and have him pick you up. And that was my 4th year into flying. I was brand new pilot. I didn't. So I was shapeable, very shapeable when I arrived. I was all ears and million questions.
That's nice too, isn't it? Yeah, well, you must have been doing something right karmically for that. That's a good place to land.
I've learned more than I thought is possible, and I had no idea what I don't know. Like this is also, like, as you mentioned about Bruce before, that he's written a lot of articles. And when I was with them, I pushed for the Bruce Tube that Bruce made me, the BGD. We did about 4 or 5 episodes at the time, because it's the knowledge. The single biggest thing what I took from my experience, my time with them, is that the knowledge gap between guys like Bruce Goldsmith, who's been in the sport from the beginning, designing, testing, and taking part in every aspect of it, and the rest of the community, there's a big gap, and it's guys like you are doing an amazing job making the gap smaller. Bruce is really good at what he does, and he doesn't have time to go and teach and things like that. And so it's the same case. I'm talking about Bruce because I know him, but it's the same for all the rest of the people who are involved in the industry.
All of them, all the legends.
I was shocked how huge the difference is and how little these things are talked about, and so that's what eventually inspired my own YouTube channel to pass on, start doing something towards that. And a good mentor is I think this sport, more than maybe any others, it's incredibly necessary. And it's to really, I mean, I bet it's the same for you, right? To get where you've gotten so fast in paragliding, it wasn't 100%.
I mean, I think the other chunk of that, and it sounds like this was you. Okay, I'm going to Nice. I think you. It's 2 things. It's mentors and it's being in the right place, and I think they really go together. For me, it was after years of sailing, and I really wanted to get into flying. It was happening to meet Nick Grease and asking him where I should live. And he said, well, there's 3 places in the U.S. that you should live if you want to fly big lines. And I think no matter where I would have moved, I ended up choosing Sun Valley, but there were really good pilots in all 3 places. And so, they went hand in hand. But it sounds similar to you, that you decided, okay, well, I'm going to go to Nice, and I'm going to base myself in a place that's one of the best places to get hours in the world. Really, I mean, you're going to.
Well, that's why Ozone and BGD is testing there. It's one of the most reliable places in the world to fly.
Exactly.
For airtime.
Yeah. I'm in one of the least reliable places, but there's good pilots here. When it's good, it's amazing. So, but the mentor thing was just enormous for me. That's actually a question I get a lot. So I'll ask you that. I think it's easier for people who are extroverts and quite gregarious. And I've had Cedar Wright on the show a few times. He's a pilot who's gotten really good, but he was incredibly aggressive at getting mentors. Some people can do that because of their personality, but often people are not. They're either introverted or they're shy. What would you suggest how do you suggest to your students to find mentors because it really is a very important piece of the game?
In that case, it's join as many groups organized, cross-country clinics, SIVs, or any kind of organized thing, because then you're part of the group and you're the, and as what I suggest especially is that try as many different instructors as you can to find a match, because paragliding has a lot of different philosophies how to do the same thing, and a lot of times multiple philosophies are correct. We don't really have one right way how to do things, and then finding the one that matches with your personality and how you want to do things. And it's trial and error. And groups, I think any kind of organized groups would help, because then for a introvert person, then you're not alone, and you're part of it. Might be easier. And these days, this podcast, YouTube is full of information. There's a lot that even courses are coming out, online things, that you can subscribe for something. Yeah, and then maybe through the same courses you'll find a mentor there, an instructor, or build a community of pilots around you, like-minded. That would be the way to. Because I just went to traveled, bought a beer to a guy and talked to him. I'm extrovert, so for me that's how I go about things, and just go talk to them. If that's not an option, then
right.
I think. Join the course or multiple, and no one course is enough. It doesn't matter how good the instructor is. You have to do repetition is the key in this sport, and currency is the king. And without currency,
you're reducing your margin. So you leave BGD, and was it kind of on your mind already to get into instructing in SIV, or is that when you went to FlyYo?
Yeah, SIV is actually never was on my radar. It was, I've never thought about. I've helped some friends of mine, and I've done some, because I've done enough of acrobatics and test piloting, so I had a good understanding of it. But it was my repeating clients for cross-country clinics that I did, that they wanted to learn SIV from the same way I taught my progression courses. And so eventually I agreed to go out and try. So I did do my research. A good friend of mine is Theo de Blix, so I spent a lot of time with him in X-Alps. I was supporting him in 21. So we did a lot of walking and a lot of talking. So I picked his brain on SIVs and all that. But once I started teaching, I quite quickly realized that the way I was teaching, it was limited. That it should be possible to do it better. Because even though I did my best to take it progressively and individually, but the structure wasn't good enough to keep everybody out of the water. Everybody was safe, but people were getting in the water where I thought that shouldn't have happened. I've missed something in a training bit somewhere. In my mind, in an ideal scenario, you shouldn't go in water if the instructions are done well. A lot easier said than done, because there's a lot of things has to go right from instructor's point of view, student's point of view, and all. And I'm not there yet as an instructor. That's my goal. I would like to have a season of SIVs with nobody in the water, but that's maybe another 10 years. We'll see. FlyYo was actually very interesting, the story, because it all started with Bruce's interview on my YouTube channel. We posted a video about the 10% breaks that you should fly hands up or fully down or actively piloting, but not that 5-10% where you just kind of react and grab the little bit of a break. And it was misunderstood, because Bruce just said fly with hands up, and people took it literally. And neither I or Bruce realized that could have been misunderstood, so it made a bit of a controversy back then. And Malin commented on it. Malin Lobb did. And I knew about FlyYo and Malin before that, and so I sent him an email. Malin just basically said that that can be misunderstood, and people have misunderstood it. So I offered Malin to do an interview for my YouTube channel to clear up that, because he's teaching SIVs. I knew him only by reputation, never met the man before. So he agreed, and I went to Annecy to Dusad and sat down with him for about 7 hours. We spent that day together on Saturday. It's not all on recorded, of course, but
wow.
So, and through the interview, he mentioned that if the instructors are willing and They're willing to share their knowledge and welcome pilots to come and learn, as long as they leave their ego at home and are actually willing to come and learn. And so I took him up on the offer, and then that was May, and in September the same year, I went to spend 5 days with them on the boat and in the classroom while they run their courses. And then Malin and Fabian would debrief me on what they do, why they do it, and I would ask a million questions. I came back with, I think it was 15 A4 pages of notes after 5 days. 15 A4 pages of notes for myself.
Oh my gosh.
The detail.
Awesome.
It's
what a treat.
Yeah,
man, that would have been awesome.
It's the detail. The Malins, it's Flyos, it's Fabian and Malin. The detail they go into is, I've never seen anything like it to go in that much precision for the specific maneuvers. They dissect everything, like a simple rotation when you enter in rotation and exit without no input, natural exit. And then, rapid adds another one. So, it's the attention to every detail and explanation, and it's all based on the 4 fundamentals that Malin and Fabian has covered it on this podcast before. And those, I should backtrack. Before the course, the biggest game changer, in my opinion, single biggest thing from Flyos is the pre-course knowledge base. And this is something I'd never thought of myself, because and I did the same in my courses. It would be the day before, or usually the day before, or in the morning, you have a 4-hour briefing of each maneuver and how it's all going to go and all the rest of it. That's 4 hours of a lot of information. I mean, with the gear check. So it's not talking for 4 hours, but it's 2 to 3 hours of theory. Yeah. And then you have your gear check and off you go the next day or the same day. That's humanly impossible to get it all in and understand.
Yeah, and just our minds can't handle it.
So the pre-course is all the theory, all the information you need for a SIV course is given to you months ahead. The moment you register for the course, you have access to, in detail, extensive knowledge base of everything from simple rotations to stalls to backfly to everything from what the box is, side briefing, whether how you're should approach the LZ and all the rest of it. And you have months to go through that. And even in my because I took all those ideas and Flyo allowed me to use their curriculum to add in my courses, and I have. And I've gone as far as I even added exercises that you can do at home. So you can already practice some basic things at home so you understand all the concepts. And so you come prepared. If you've done your homework, and then I did my last course before going to Flyo in August, and my next course was in April. And the result of the progression from the students and how much quicker they understood things, progressed, and easier it was for them, it's a night and day between what I was teaching before and applying the structure. And to me, among all the other things, it's one of the biggest things is the pre-course knowledge base. At least the difference between my courses and theirs. I can't speak of other people's courses and how they run them. Because people came prepared and they knew already what's pitch back point, pitch forward. And
I would imagine it's just so much less stressful having the time to go through all those things, so you're not just getting thrown under the fire. There's tons of science now that shows that visualization is right almost the same as actually doing it. So visualizing shooting a basketball and landing it every time, just doing it over and over and over, is the same thing as going to the court and shooting basketballs. So I would imagine just seeing the video, going through the progression, understanding what stalling, what side of the wing or full stalls, all the maneuvers, rapid exit, normal exit, you're doing it in a sense, even though they might not be thinking that they're visualizing and seeing it, but they're watching the video. their body's being trained, their mind's being trained to actually do the maneuver.
I tell them even between the runs to do that on the way up to the mountain, just to close your eyes, visualize. I say, yeah, for sure, visualization works amazing for that. And you can practice some basic things.
Yeah, it really is.
Like a simple natural exit with a very low amount of energy, because you don't need a lot of energy. It's enough to just generate a bit of it, release it, wait for it to come out, and look for the throw control. Find it with one attempt instead of 2 or 3. As most of us cross-country pilots, we control the wing actively, but we rarely control the roll with one input. It's usually multiple. And it's nice to try to do another simple natural exit with a single input to find exactly where the roll is and how much you need to stop it just with that, and then have a clean pitch back and let it shoot forward. And you don't need nose down. You don't need even 45-degree angle. It's a very little energy with very low consequences for that. And it's all progression based instead of just throwing you in the deep end and let's see if you got something out of it.
I remember Fabian saying something that really blew my mind, and I might have this wrong because it's been years, but I think one of the first things he does, regardless of the pilot level, so you're a 10-hour ENA pilot or a multi-year World Cup pilot, he has you do I think 360 with the rapid exit. Just, okay, do it. And so he can assess you. And I think he was saying that some tiny percentage, I mean, just tiny percentage of the really quote unquote good pilots, the World Cup pilots that have been at it for a long time, that, were good World Cup pilots, couldn't do that maneuver well. They weren't very good at the most basic foundational maneuvers, because he said rather than having kind of a set, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you've worked there, but rather than having kind of a set curriculum that is, okay, day 1, we're going to do an asymmetric collapse and we're going to do these 6 things day 1. And then day 2, we're going to do these 6 things. And then you're going to end with a full stall the last day, rather than this would just be, okay, I'm going to watch you do this 360 with a rapid exit, and then we're going to design the course. We're going to design we're not going to have a checkbox.
Yeah, it's not
right.
Yeah, it's not far off.
Is that the FlyO approach?
So the reason he has to show you that, because in that 360 rapid exit, it shows you all situational awareness. You go through all the axes, and most pilots can't get it right. Because we all have habits how we gonna exit it, and it's not a clean rapid, and it's a tricky, especially the more airtime you have, the harder it is to learn this precisely, because you have to break habits now. The newer pilots is easier, but the reason they ask is to see where you're at, and the course structure will be similar for all, but what the biggest difference is that there's a lot of time and effort put in the rotations, the natural exit and rapid exit. Rapid being just that you pull by yourself instead of let the wing come out. And mostly rapid to get it clean. Get it quick, nose down, eventually all the way nose down, quick rapid exit, clean, catch and release, and that's it. Without no parasitic overlift roll or everything. Because that means that once you go farther into auto rotations, it's the same family. So it's the same principles to control it. And then if you go in the stalls and you have a asymmetric shoot auto rotation, then you can handle it and all that. So it's the fundamentals comes in play, of course, that without going too much in detail. But the idea is that we spend time in paragliding, 80-90% rotating. Thermaling is a rotation, and it's the same as a rapid exit, just at smaller energy. Like you rotate at the less angles and all the. So from the way I see it, if you come to the course and in the 3 days you only learn the rotations, but you really get them, that's a win already. Depends on what level. And then next we're gonna try to get you to auto rotation if possible, so you can exit cleanly that and quickly, because that's the number 1 killer in our sport. And only if all goes well and the pilot is able to get through, then we go for negatives and work on those. So the structure is based on what's most important. So you go from the rotations, which we spend most time in, outer rotations to avoid any, unwanted meeting with the mountain, and then you go for negatives to clear things, and then you can play with that structure here and there. There's multiple exercises these I would call are the main blocks, but there's a lot of different little things you can play with to adjust or get people out of when they're stuck. And
Karlis, front and center on your website, I went to the SIV courses. This is part of your progression, but the Malin touched on all these as well, but I'd love for you to just speak briefly about the four. It sounds like there's four things that you're most concerned with in your SIVs: the base of support, the disassociating arms, love that, full brake range, so using the full brake range of the wing, and situational awareness. Can you just touch on each of those? Why are those so important?
Yeah. So I like Malin's example for base of support. That's the first one, right? So you want to have a good base of support, and the easiest thing, meaning lean back and be comfortable in the harness and use the harness as designed. And the easiest way to imagine that or visualize that is to imagine a race driver on an exercise ball racing around the track, or being snugly held by the bucket seat. And it's the same in paragliding. If you start leaning forward in your harness, you're not using the full support of the harness. And then the harness is more twitchy and it's not holding you as designed. So you will look for your own body's balance with your hands. As we do, we've learned that as kids, when you fall, you throw your hands out there to catch you. And so when you are more secure in the harness, when you have good base of support, then you start trusting your harness that you're not going to fall out, and that's actually fine to be in any configuration you can find yourself in paragliding, that the harness will be there and you will eventually be caught by it. Then you can start dissociating your arms to control the wing instead of controlling your body posture or catching yourself. And dissociating arms is incredibly important because usually in paragliding, or actions needed to pilot the wing is counterintuitive, contra or instinct. Like if we fall forward, we're gonna put our hands forward, where we have to put them behind us in paragliding. If we fall back, the hands, it's opposite to what we are learned as a human on the ground. So that needs to be controlled by the mind. This full brake range, that's what I mentioned earlier about the YouTube video with Bruce. It's that we have to let the wing fly fully when needed, and we have to control it fully when needed, or whatever amount of brakes needed. But what we definitely don't want to do is hold about 5 to 10% brake input. And on any modern wing, that is what creates a lot more aggressive collapses than the certification would predict, because certification is a collapse without pilot input. But once you add input, then any ENA wing with those 5 to 10% brake input will have a CCC result on the collapse. Wow. YouTube is full of this, where people launch off on the takeoff, and just after the takeoff, they grab the two toggles in one hand to adjust the harness, and they have a massive frontal,
because their airspeed is low,
and they fall out of the sky. That airspeed is one, and by grabbing even the handles together one hand, you're adding a touch of a brake. And that, I call it reversed reflex profile. And that creates more aggressive pitch movement for the wing and more stable, so it doesn't collapse as quick as it should and goes farther, and you can fall into the wing just from that. Do you
see this as a big reason for people taking huge hits coming into land as well?
Yeah, I actually recently saw a video of that on Lake Garda. Yeah, it's sort of the panic reaction, because we fly, and especially the older pilots, because back in the day it was taught that way, that you should put the pressure of your arms on the wings. If that was true back then, it's definitely not true anymore today. And the modern wings like to fly hands up or accelerated. And by hands up, I should specify, it's contact position.
You're feeling the wing, but you're not.
I don't mean
in the brakes,
literally,
but you're feeling the wing.
Yeah, you're not inducing or bending the trailing edge. Trailing edge is still sharp as knife, and then you can control it actively as needed, when needed, and let it fly the moment you've done what you needed to do. And so most people don't use the top 5 to 15%. Like we kind of fly at shoulder pressure or hands roughly at shoulder and deeper. And rarely people are willing to go actually all the way up. And so that's the full brake range, right? So you go all the way 0, contact position, and all the way to stall point, or stall if you have to, for depending. So you get comfortable using the whole brake range. It's the same as driving a car. Sometimes you need to use the full steering wheel's rotation, not just 20-30%. And the last one is situational awareness, because it's all nice and good to have all the skills that you learned in the SIV, but if you don't know when to use them, then what's the point of them? And so what we do in the courses is that throughout the course we will add little pointers to help pilots to look around more and to pay attention more, and the repetition is what really helps you to start looking around. It's again comparing to cars, because everybody knows a car. When you start driving as a new driver, all you're thinking is about the rev counts and the gear shifts. So, you're all focused in your cockpit. You barely see that there's, children running on the street, or you have very small capacity to see something. Where now, after years of driving, you drive for 5 hours, you don't remember what you did the 5 hours. You were thinking about something else. So that's the sort of where we want to get you eventually as a pilot, is that the wing control, that's the physical bit, and the situational awareness is that what you actually are there for, because flying cross country is 95% mental game, observation and decision making, and only about 5% of physical input. And the goal is to get you and it's the same when you start, you're about 99% physical with the ground handling. And then the goal is to get you from that to the 5% physical as soon as safe as possible, so you have your situational awareness and you can keep yourself safe.
And I don't know that there's any statistics to back up what I'm about to say, but just going on what you've just said, and I'm curious if you agree with me that in my experience, I would say the large majority of accidents happen because of the loss of that last one, the situational awareness. I mean, when I've seen the bad stuff happen, it's because people spend way too long in the cockpit, to use your analogy of being in the car. They forget to look at the ground. They don't react in time, so they've had the margin and they've lost it. Now, and then there are the really bad accidents where there's just no margin, and there's very little the pilot could have done except give themselves more margin before they got into that position. In other words, being really low, and there's never too low. We should still throw, but the really bad stuff I've seen has been when the cascade goes too long and there's no throw.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any statistical back up that, but I definitely agree with you on that. We get tunnel vision when we do, when we new to something, and a collapse for most pilots is something new that they haven't practiced enough on, and when it happens in the wild, you were just nicely thermaling, and all of a sudden this is happening, and it's too many things happening at the same time, and it's too fast. Most pilots, if you ask what happened, they're barely gonna recollect, and often the recollection will be completely different from the video. If you have a video footage, that will be if you ask straight away after the accident. It's without proper training and skill, repetition, it's impossible to have full situational awareness, because you won't see the details, and without that, that's why they spend so much time in the cascade. And I would say that there's also this I guess it's the intermediate syndrome, right? When people think that they can fix something but haven't done it for a while, and then they spend too much time trying to fix it without, which also comes back to situational awareness, that they don't look down how much time they have left.
Karlis, two things I want to talk to you about. One is, we talked about some of these before we started recording, but Jock had some questions. You're running these comps, the Polish, Irish, the Norway, the UK. You're doing these comps in Lorraine, and he had some questions about those. When does weather prediction become an art rather than a science? What does he mean by that?
I think he's referring to local. I'm very fortunate with my mentors, and the weather is no different. I have a man who's lived in this area for 30 plus years and been a meteorologist for over 40, and also is a paragliding pilot. So I think he's referring to him. Also, Jock himself is very good at Meteo, so we have had a lot of conversations about it during the events, because it's, especially in this area, it's quite complicated when it comes to aerology. So you have the general Meteo that you can see on GFS or something, and then the aerology kicks in as the day progresses on any thermic day. So the art form, I think, what he's referring is the understanding of the micro meteorology of the influences that we fly in. And the general Meteo is very well documented, and that's, we're doing pretty good at that as humans, but the micro
this is the really fine data that the models aren't picking up.
No, we're not there yet. I'm sure eventually, but at the moment for paragliding pilots, so that comes from local knowledge, or some, if you're really well at understanding, you can bring it on to any other mountains. It's possible. And the Jock, on the contrary, is very good at reading large systems visually. So you look at the cloud, at the sky, from the stratosphere, at the highest layers, and he's very, very good at predicting how the system moves for the next hours or day, depending on that. Which I'm not very good. Where I'm very good at the micro. So that's where it became an art for the Polish and Irish, because we had the local knowledge and the micro meteorology, and he had the global. From observational point of view, and this is without, of course, we used forecasting and all the observations from satellites, but visually seeing it, that you can see that, okay, so this is going to move there in the next 15-20 minutes, and how that will, especially stratus layers are nice and important for us if they cover the skies. And
what was the catalyst to get into running comps? Were you are you an active comp pilot yourself?
Oh, no, not at all. I've done, I think, 5 events myself as a pilot. Well, I did the World Championships as my second competition. But I'm Latvian.
A little easier to make the team.
It's not a French team, it's not the same level. Basically, if you qualify by the FAI standard criteria, you're in, because there's nobody else. But no, it was a friend of mine, the local campsite owner, the Camping Monteglin, the HQ where we hold the events. A couple of years ago, asked me, could we organize our own event? Because we've been friends for years, and the Shabre Open, the Ozone Shabre Open, been running from Shabre for about 2 decades, and he's been hosting that event every time, and he wanted to have some more events in the area, and I want to promote the area, because I love the place. It's incredibly complicated to fly. At the same time, it's incredibly safe to fly. It's forgiving for tactical mistakes, and weather is incredibly reliable. We have 300 days of sunshine here. It's so that's how it came about, and I went, how hard can it be? without
I could have told you that, man.
knowing much more about it. And as you know from your own experience, it's quite
it's an undertaking.
Yeah, it's quite a endeavor. I'm lucky. I have a very strong team. I also for the comps, same as I've done with everything else in paragliding, I seeked out mentors, and I was incredibly lucky with them. The local team for Ozone Shabra Open, Jazz, Brian, and Luis, they've been supporting through long meetings with me and me asking a million questions. Brad Genoway endured me for a week in his house last year to ask a million questions from him about how do you go about it? What do you need? What's that? You know, I had no clue as an organizer. And it's mentors again, and asking million questions, and no matter how stupid they might sound in your head, but you still ask because you need to know the answer.
They're a big team effort.
Yeah,
and we get to say we're the meet organizer, but yeah, you couldn't do it without a lot of people. It's a lot.
Oh no, not at all. It's I'm just I'm connecting people and bringing them together, and without the team, it's impossible. I'm incredibly lucky with all the team. It's we're doing it again next year. We have 3 events as well, and I wouldn't at this stage, because I have limited experience with comp organizing, I wouldn't do it with any other team, because these people I know them for years. They local, they know all the places, and without them it wouldn't happen.
I don't know how comfortable you all talking about this question. We talked about this again before we started recording, but Jock had a question about, it sounded like you had to ground one or more pilots for making unsafe decisions. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here. It's potentially that they'll be listening to this, but what was the reason? What can we all learn from that? Because obviously we see in comps and organizing comps, and I've done a ton of comps. We see people doing some pretty risky things that we'd like to see not happen. But what was the reason to have to do that? I guess that's pulling out the red card. You're going home.
Yeah. Well, for all 3 events, I was the safety director. So it was, and now there's a whole another story about the new regulations in France after
Timo?
Serious accident. Yeah, after Timo, things in France changed quite drastically. It actually changed the day before our first event. I had a very long phone call with Julien Garcia that you've had also interviewed. He's been incredibly supportive throughout the process, and it was. So we had very strict safety rules and regulations set by the French Federation, and which I think is a very good thing. It will take some getting used to from the pilot point of view, because now you will have more responsibility as a pilot when you come and join the competition. But I think it will make it a lot safer, because we didn't have safety issues. Of course, we had some incidents and accidents, pilots flying, 150 pilots flying, there will be that. But, that's a bit off topic, but we introduced radio checks before taking off. And radios are mandatory to be on. And I've been in comms myself, and I turn it off because it's annoying as hell. Yeah. But I found that, but I did what I learned from Flyo, pre-course knowledge base. So I did pre-comp emails to inform pilots about these new requirements, what we expect from them, and it helped. And then, of course, repeating it all, safety briefings, and every day on takeoff. And as our team got better at it as well, the last event, the radio checks took less than 15 minutes.
So what are you doing? So before you launch, you're checking straps? You kind of have a system where you're checking the harness straps, chin strap, and radio that their PTT's working. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, so that's all explained in emails and safety briefing that pilots should try to do it at home before. And the PTT, so radio check is a literal radio check. Pilot number such and such. and they give it back. And in this radio check, you can pick out the faulty PTTs, the ones who get stuck, or and I even was able to recognize just by the tone after a while, because and the same pilots will have the same issues throughout the comp. Yeah. So you pick them out quite quickly, and I swapped out some radios. We have a bunch of extra ones, and we gave them pre-programmed radios for the event, and it solved an issue there. Also, another thing introduced is that maximum time to talk on the radio is 30 seconds, and suggested is 15. And that also limits that noise that you get in the competition all the time, by pilots transmitting all the time.
So this is a setting you're actually changing on people's radios?
They change themselves. Yeah. All the radios has it, as far as I know. All the radios has a time to talk limiter, and we send the instructions on email where to look for it, and then you pick up a manual, you find your radio's manual, and you'll find which setting that is.
Okay, I'm going to need to get these from you. This is great. Yeah. I've learned a lot.
Oh, for radios, I went in before the competitions, I went down the rabbit hole with multiple radio experts to learn all this. I already knew quite a bit for my own courses, but for comps. So we had very little PTT issues. And even in the air, and we also talked about how to respond in case of an emergency. I'm going off topic.
No, that's okay. That's right. This is fascinating to me.
Because in the Polish, the first competition we did, the Polish and Irish, we had a rescue throw, and there were 3 to 5 pilots trying to transmit at the same time in Polish, in trying to help. And one of them transmitted for about a minute and a half, talking and trying to explain the situation, but his mic was exposed to the wind, and the whole minute and a half was just blocked. Yeah. So this is another place where the time to talk is a great thing to have, to cut off, and then you can tell the pilot, like, look, your mic,
you're wasting your breath. Yeah.
And he's also wasting valuable time for the organizer.
Sure.
So we talked about it for the next events, that it has to be short, precise, concise. You have to think before you talk, things like that, simple things, because everybody, the people who are on radios, they want to help. They're not trying to, annoy the organizer. But when you do these simple things, that before you're going to say something, think what you're going to say, then prepare yourself, press the short messages within the 15 to 30 seconds max, and let it go and wait for the response. Because it's Europe, we have multiple languages. We specified it all has to be in English, because the team doesn't speak all your national languages. English is the language we run the event in, and things like this it seems very simple, but that reminding it over and over and over and again. And also, I, as a safety director, was not allowed to launch anybody who didn't have a working radio. That's a request from FFVL now. So once you tell that to the pilots, if you don't do the radio check, you're not flying today. Things get easier. And it's not that I want to ground people. It's not like we had extra radios. We were prepared for in case, and we did swap out multiples. Radios break, people sit on, there's things happen. And then things like this, like a simple thing as time to talk and radio check and takeoff, and because when I did my first events, I thought radio is just, whatever they're going to tell me when the weather is bad or all that. But the real importance of radio is that from the organization point of view, from the safety point of view, is that once a pilot is missing, meaning that your Flymaster tracker or whichever live tracking system you're using is not working for whatever reason, it's electronics, they're not 100%. If we can't reach them on the radio, the next one will be phone, of course, but that not everybody can. Then we need that frequency to ask other pilots to locate somebody. And if your live tracking is off and you switch your radio on and we can't find you, we assume we assume the worst and we act accordingly. We have protocol for that, what we do. and up to calling a helicopter and search and rescue within very short period of time. It's we inform the emergency service 15 minutes. 15 to 30 minutes is where we inform them that we might have a. So it's really short period of time, and this radio checks and PTTs, that's incredibly important to have it working. Not reaching a pilot is something historically that has.
It's a problem.
I don't want to get in.
Yeah,
it can be a problem if you can't communicate with the pilot or find them.
Yeah,
and then on top of that, when you have 150 pilots and one of pilots are not applying to these rules, then the organization is focused on that one, and you jeopardize the rest of the pack.
Sure,
it's a snowball effect. So that's more. But to answer the original question about grounding a pilot, it's multiple failed takeoffs and putting himself at danger. It was the only pilot that I actually had to stop on takeoff. And it was about 3 days into the event that later. I think it was one of the last days, and I've noticed that already before.
Yeah,
throughout the competition.
Multiple blown launches. And what did you do? You just said, "Hey, pull you out of the line." You just had to kind of sit him down, and
well, he kind of rolled down the mountain. Not mountain. The slope is quite gradual. So
I know this is Le Run.
In Shelburne. So it's nothing dangerous. Just a few bruises on, and it was. I think it was about 20 minutes left till the window, or 15 minutes left till the window closed for the start. And by the time he would get back on the mountain, it's like, so it wasn't I didn't had to stop him, just as a window open. So the timing aligned well, and he was bruised up and his harness was damaged. So it was an easy call, and nobody was upset. Other than that, I haven't had anybody in takeoff that I had to stop. And in the air, even though we have protocols for that, there are, again, with the new rules in France, is that if we have no live tracking and I can't track you on an instrument, you have to report back to me every 10 minutes or so. So radio contact. And then if you don't, and that's up to the safety director's discretion. If I have one and I feel like I can safely track him, that's fine. But if I have 2 or 3, I might land all of them, because I can't anymore track 2 or 3 pilots without live tracking.
You mean you might stop the task?
No, land the pilots without tracking.
Okay, gotcha. Right.
And to then, of course, to not penalize pilots for instrument failure, we have a backup with a Pure Track, which is you can use any live tracking device you have, from InReaches to your phones to anything you have.
Mm-hmm.
You put it in one place, and we have a group for the event, so we have a backup tracking for everybody. And then, of course, our first thing is, if your live tracking is not working, we go for the backup.
Yeah.
And if we can't find you in the backup, then we proceed, because we don't want to interfere with other pilots competing and talking on radio. If we can avoid it, we don't talk on radio. A perfect task is radio silence the whole way, except us saying that it's all good. We every now and then we'll say something, so you still know that we're there. But ideally, you hear nothing. That would be.
Do you create a specific safety group of pilots, or is everybody on your safety committee? I've gone back and forth with this. We've had comps where everybody's on the safety committee. So in other words, I mean, anybody is always in the comps I've run. Anybody can call in a level at any time. Level 1, level 2, level 3. If you've got a concern, you can call. But we've gone back and forth with that. We've had it so everybody can be on the safety committee, but then that was hit, especially in the World Cup. People didn't like that. They wanted a safety committee. They wanted 3 or 4 pilots that we would try to pick out pilots that you're going to have some in the front, some in the middle, some in the back. And they're really the safety committee. And again, anybody can call in, but these are the people who are, in a sense, paying more attention to.
Yeah. So for us, we had a safety committee of 3 pilots chosen from the event. Anybody can call in level as they want. If it's level 3, you have to land. If you're gonna call level 3, you land immediately yourself. So there's no manipulation with that. We didn't find that it's an issue that pilots would call in too much levels. Maybe we just got lucky because it's only 3 events. And the safety committee they gave us some nice feedback when it was early thermals or before the start and things like that. That's where safety committee can, talk more. And the rest of the pilots were welcome to do the levels as they see fit. And we had a few times where pilots would call a level that wasn't there, and it because they were on lee side or it was a rough thermal for them. So we check live tracking where the pilot is because it's requested, pilot number such and such, and we have a look, satellites visually, physically, because in France it's requested to have safety director and meet director. So the meet director, so safety director follows the pack, roughly middle of the track, so I can physically see the sky. Plus we have a meteorologist, of course, and so we have multiple people on the ground checking the weather and tracking everybody. And then if it is level such and such, and we see it is like drizzling rain, level 2, but it's not just drizzling, then we say that such and such TP has such and such conditions. But we haven't found an issue with that. I think with a higher level, more competitive, I guess there can be more issues with levels.
Yeah, well, what we learned in this last one, because we had pretty dynamic weather for the World Cup, is we had one day in particular that got pretty spicy, and we knew it was going to get spicy. We were trying to pull off a short task in a short window, and we knew it was going to go ballistic, and it did. And just before I called the task, I requested level. I hadn't heard any levels, not from my safety committee and not from anybody. But I was standing right there. I was on top of the mountain, but I could, the lead pack was coming into goal, which was right in front of launch. And I wanted, hey, let's hear some levels. And I got a couple level 2s in the lead pack, and that was it. And what we decided afterwards, because it was clearly level 3, but it was what we learned. People don't like calling level 3. It's a cultural thing that I think needs to shift. That there's some, I don't know if it's shame, but there's partly like what you said. If you call level 3, you've got to land. But I mean, you get in this competition mindset that, well, I'm not hearing anybody else call it, so maybe it's 2, maybe it's still 2, level 2. But it was very interesting because we had a big debrief on it, and what we came up with, the end result was that there's a stigmatism to calling level 3 that I think needs to change in our community. And it's not something we even need to discuss right now, but it's interesting. I think there's a real reticence of pilots to call level 3.
Yeah, I can see that. It's also when me as a pilot in my limited competitions, I didn't even feel comfortable early in my career to go on the radio and say anything. There's also
exactly.
that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now it's. I think there could be more, like the safety briefings is one, but before the competitions, this could be discussed. I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Karlis, we're way already past our time limit, but I cannot let you go without asking you about my favorite subject in all the world, the X Alps. You supported Theo, who I love, in 21. I raced in that one as well. And you might recall he and I were battling at the back at that one around Dent to Osh. I didn't get to see you guys that day, but passed. Yeah, after he had an airspace penalty delay there, right?
Yeah,
he had quite a, as we all had in that one. The weather was atrocious in 21, but he had quite an eventful competition with hitting the cable, and but I'd love to just, and again, we don't have ton of time to dive into it, as I'd love. We could have a whole show on the X Alps, but just from your perspective as a supporter, maybe a really good story from the race, or any big takeaways? I mean, did you guys walk away from that going, my God, that was just stupid, crazy, fun? Where'd you land on at the end? Because I know it was tough for him at the end.
Yeah, for me, it was an amazing adventure, but I was on the ground. I would not fly in those conditions. That's just not my cup of tea. You guys, as a spectator for X Alps, I knew the race is tough, but I had no idea. Like watching the live trackings from my home and all that, I had no clue. I gained so much more respect for all the pilots who's ever done the races. It's insane. At least that year was absolutely insane for the conditions. The walking, the hiking, and I did about 30% of what Theo did when it comes to walking and hiking, but I didn't need to fly in that exhaustion. It's not the same. For me, it was going in, I knew that Theo and we're going to hate each other or we're going to be friends after this. And there's no two other outcomes. And I was, this kind of adventure, there's only two options really, right? You're never going to talk with that person again, or you're going to be friends for life. So luckily we're friends. So it went very good. Yeah. I was very happy. The team got together, and we had a really great adventure. We had the cable. We were really dialing in before the cable. We were getting good, catching up, getting to the mid pack, and the cable just. I think that was the turning point for the event for us. And even then, after it was getting good, and the airspace was the choice between airspace or trees. So Theo took airspace.
That's gotten so many pilots over the years. Where he hit the cable, and what was the?
What's the name?
The other guy
just
that hit
near
it.
Martin.
Geez.
Yeah, just near Martin. I need a map for that.
Yeah. But I mean, it was. Aaron Durigati has a crazy story about flying in cloud in that same valley, and I have flown up and down from going both ways through that, because the cables are actually really bad on both sides of that pass, where he hit them, and on the other side as well, the Switzerland side, I guess, or the northern side. But I have flown through there just recreationally, and it is terrifying. It's just incredible. I remember after Theo hit it, and who was the other pilot? Why am I drawing such a blank? There was the other pilot who broke his back. He got helicoptered out. I can't believe it. It's just, I don't know how these memories go.
Italian athlete, it will come back.
The Italian, the young guy. He's amazing. Anyway, I remember that, Jürgen called me as I was walking into that valley, because I was behind you guys at that point. And for me too, things were starting to get better. I had a horrible start, and then things were starting to get better. Actually, Theo and I were together in the early on in the race. But I remember Jürgen actually calling me, and just, he was almost, you could hear the tension and the fear in his voice. Just, please be careful. Please be careful going through this area. Make sure you have because you have that cable layer on your phone, and it can show the cables. And it's a dicey place to fly.
And that specific on the train, valley, which we are. That specific valley. I met a local guy, a paragliding pilot, who was from the valley, and I took him in the car and went through the whole valley, and he showed me every single cable ahead of where Theo hit after we got there. And even though he went up and took off again, and he hit almost again another cable that we didn't see. And we were on the ground, totally in the car with binoculars looking ahead, and it's just... It's insane. You can't even describe it. It's just unbelievable, and they're totally invisible. There's so many of them, those little single thin ones that are invisible. One of the things I
started suggesting to many others when they were in that era, if they're just free flying, is, just make sure you don't have polarized sunglasses, because then they're really invisible.
I say that you should fly above the grass. Fly at the cliff height. Don't fly at the grass, because it's to collect hay mostly for cows. So it's above the grass line. There's usually these little cables. That's what I've been told, at least.
Yeah, if you're just surfing the trees on the side, where we always do, and we're just trying to get some extra distance, you're going to hit one. It's almost guaranteed. They're coming out of those trees in the worst ways. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are friends. That's a good place to end a pretty radical adventure. But thanks for all this, Karlis. A real pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to either flying in one of your comps or doing an SIV with you or doing something fun with you in the future, but I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So, for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription, and it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you'll be in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account, and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.